What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 64 of BetParks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. As we sit here, there's hockey players on the ice. Hockey is happening. That is brilliant. Rookie camp is underway for the Flyers. Rookie camp is underway for a ton of teams around the NHL. And Anthony DeMarco join us in just a second. Let me tell you about the BetParks app. Oh, my goodness. What a great time to get on the BetParks app. Now you may go, well, why is it a great time, Jason? Here, I'll tell you. Because you have a full college football card this weekend. You have a full NFL card this weekend. Kicked off last night for week 2, Thursday night football. You've got baseball winding it down and headed towards the playoffs. You've got tennis. You've got golf. You've got, Formula One's in a break this week, but you got that when it's back. You've got futures, live in-game betting, same-game parlays, player performances, alternate lines, first to score, exact score, you name it, it's all there. Touchdowns run, touchdowns, over-unders, yards, all of it. It is, you'll be inundated with every option you can think of, plus a few more to wager your money on sports. So check it out. Get the BetParks app. Use the promo code Jason750. That'll get you a risk-free bet up to $750. Terms and conditions to apply. That is for new and existing users. So again, Jason, JSON 750, risk-free bet up to $750. So get the BetParks app today. You need to be present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's bring him in right now from north of the border. From the fourth period, it is Anthony DeMarco. What's going on, Ant?
Not too much, man. In my my new home, so that moving bullshit is done. Thank God.
It's the worst, isn't it?
Yeah. And now I'm in my new office, and kind of sterile in here. Kind of looks like a hospital room, but clean at least. So gotta get some more character in here eventually.
I've been helping my brother move a little bit because I'm the dude with the truck. So anybody that has a truck, like, you're the automatic first call asshole.
De facto mover.
Can't fit a couch in my in my little car, so let's call Jason. We'll do it in the truck. It's bananas. So
pretty soon they're gonna be asking you to move a fridge. They ask you to move a fridge, a stove. Why stop at the couch? You know?
Oh yeah, I'm getting calls on all kinds of things. So, but it is what it is. The season's kind of here. Rookie camp's underway, and I know Lappy yesterday talked about Tyson Forster and that he looks like a totally different player. I'm looking forward to kind of getting eyes on all this stuff, and a couple games this weekend, rookie games. Can you believe it's hockey season again already?
It's crazy, the turnaround, but then when you really look into it, the Stanley Cup was awarded in like late June. The draft was in mid-July, or early July. This free agency was mid-July. And look, the Flyers, obviously, it's been one day of camp. This is day 2. I spoke to someone with the Flyers who obviously was there, and he said, players have shown up in shape, which is good. And I think that's kind of like the theme, is that players were put on notice this season that you could not walk through camp. And obviously, I'm sure that was directed more so for like the main training camp. But it's good to see how these young guys are showing up in shape as well, especially when this season is surrounded a lot about these young guys. And look, obviously, is Forster going to make the team? Probably not. Is Denway, Wisdom, are these guys going to be factors in the NHL this season? No. But with all of them turning pro and joining the Phantoms, and a lot of them having high ceilings, like especially a guy like Elliot Denway, like slowly but surely becoming one of the more intriguing prospects that this team has. Obviously a centerman, which is something that this team can use in droves. So yeah, really interested to see what some of these guys can do here.
And is this the pivot point right now? The last 2 years, so you had the 1920 season, 69 regular season games. They finished it really strong. They go to the bubble. They finally win a round of the playoffs by beating Montreal, who in a lot of technical terms really wasn't a playoff team. They were only in because of the expanded format. I think they were worthy because you look at the next year, they went to a cup final. But anyway, they beat the Montreal Canadiens. They take the Islanders to Game 7, which is still stunning to me when you watch that series, but they did. And then it was the nosedive. Decent start to the next season, although, the process looked like shit. And eventually the process looking like shit caught up with the team, and they had a horrific month of March. I mean, historically bad. Then last year they got off to a decent start record-wise, but again, the process looked like shit. And then eventually, injuries came in with Sean Couturier, and Ryan Ellis only played 4 games, all that. And last year was, one of the worst seasons in franchise history. Are we at a moment now with John Tortorella and hopefully some better health and better luck? I mean, towards just tackling everything, health of the team and the physicians, all that stuff. He talked about it on NHL Network Radio. I was kind of stunned to hear it. But is this the pivot point where they pivot from being down to going back up? Is it a pivot point to leveling off, or are they not at rock bottom?
It's hard to think that they're not at rock bottom, right? Like after last season. And I think that almost just by osmosis, they're going to get better because you have, presumably Sean Couturier and Kevin Hayes, arguably their 2 most important forwards, 2 most important players in a lot of ways, back at full health. And, we've heard John Tortorella kind of bring up Hayes several times. And I think Hayes is quietly going to be probably one of the, I guess, biggest leaders and voices in the room this year. I don't think it's slam dunk there's going to be a captain, but I think that he would be a very good shot to be that. That's not exactly profound or anything, but I think that this is a year that one way or another, things are going to change. I don't think that they could go down any farther after last season. And I think that they are going to be better. How much better is left to be determined. But it's not even just the main roster. It's a turning point for how we're going to see the system in terms of how the kids are going to develop, what's going on in Lehigh. Because it's like the first year where all of the, let's say, Chuck Fletcher guys and more specifically Brent Flair guys are being injected into the everyday operations of this team down in Lehigh, like Denwye, Wisdom. You have Tyson Forster, obviously. Cam York is going to be a full-time NHLer at this point. And now we're going to start to see what we really have with this team, not just in the here and now, but in the long term. Like, we're going to see what, arguably the most important prospect this team has right now in Tyson Forster, probably aside from Cutter Gauthier, how he could cut his teeth in with the pros. What a guy like Denwye, who is a 5th-round pick, how he can translate his game as a centerman at the pro level. What can a guy like Zayd Wisdom do, who seems to be like a heart and soul character guy? So not just at the NHL level do I think that it is a turning point. I think that it's a big turning point in finally seeing maybe what we have with these Chuck Fletcher and Brett Flair draft picks.
Yeah. And that's, I think that's the thing that the fan base wants to jump onto is go, if we kind of knew that this was the pivot point of an ascension, then I think people would go, okay, I can get excited about that. But I think people just don't know if this is rock bottom or if the ascension is beginning or the pieces are here for the team to start ascending. Because you do have some older pieces like, Couturier is 29 this year. Kevin Hayes is, up there in years as well. You got some young players like Konechny, who a lot of people feel disappointed by. Provorov, disappointed by. Sanheim, not disappointed by, but they're a little nervous you may lose him and free agency, or does it make sense to extend him for the Flyers in free agency? And you have some young players, but I don't know if there's anybody they really have grabbed on or gravitated to. There's not a darling, if you will, on this team, other than probably the goalie, Carter Hart.
And even the goalie, Carter Hart, a lot of guys want nothing to do with this guy either. Yeah. So, I mean, that you are kind of looking for that one player to latch on to and kind of dub as like the knight in shining armor. I think at times that guy is kind of being Joel Farabee because he is a homegrown talent. He broke into the NHL, when he was 20 years old. He's been an exciting offensive player at times, but now with him on the shelf to start the season, that's been kind of taken away. And I think that was kind of the main reason why people were latching on to the idea of signing Johnny Gaudreau or trading for Alex DeBrincat, because you could at least say, well, this team's going to be mediocre. You're probably not going to make the playoffs, but this is our knight in shining armor. Here's the guy that's going to be the linchpin to turning this entire operation around. And now you're kind of looking at it and you kind of have a bunch of Batmans and no Robins. And this is why I think it's frustrating for people, because usually even on a bad team, take the Flyers last year, for example, no longer a superstar, but you still had Claude Giroux. You still had a guy who at times was a dominant offensive player. But now you're going to watch a team who you don't really have that flashy, entertaining guy. You don't have that guy who has the potential to be a star and player in the NHL moving forward. But you're going to be kind of looking, I guess, with one eye open at what's going on in Lehigh, because you have a guy like Forster cutting his teeth down there, back healthy, and all the other guys I just mentioned to see what they could potentially do. So it's just going to be a year, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, of figuring out what you have with this team. And part of that is figuring out if you have that building block, a star player to finally be able to build around in the absence of Claude Giroux.
Yeah, Giroux's been the face on the marquee, or the name on the marquee, for so long. I guess if you're putting a name on the marquee now, it is going to be hard. But they need to figure out what they have with like guys like, I think it's real intriguing this preseason and early part of the NHL season is guys like Wade Allison, guys like Tanner Laczynski, those guys. Okay, you guys played long college careers, you're ready for the NHL, but is your body ready for the NHL in the sense that can it stay healthy? Because availability is so important, and they just have not been able to remain available for any sustained period of time. This is a season, I believe both of them are NHL caliber players, Ant, but I gotta see it through time that they can stay available and stay healthy. I'm not asking them to play all 82, but you get dinged up here and there, I get it. But it's been long-term injuries for both far too often. And we got to see if those players can get healthy and be contributors so you can rely on them. And they got to be available if you're going to rely on them.
Well, look, this is the third straight year where, and myself included, where we're penciling in, or a lot of people are just penciling in Laczynski and Allison to be on the roster opening night. It's the third straight season. And look, I think, and I spoke to someone with the Flyers a few weeks ago, and they said to me, like, yeah, that we're expecting these two guys to battle for bottom six jobs. And unlike last season or the season before that, there are wide open gigs here. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not considering Patrick Brown and Zach McEwen locks to start on the fourth line opening night. 13th, 14th, maybe 15th forwards. Yeah, sure. Stay with the NHL team. I would expect that. But you have some wide open spots here for Laczynski and for Allison to make this team. And these are guys that, like, they're not spring chickens. Like, they're both, 24, 25 years old?
Yeah.
They're not
full college careers.
Yeah, they played full college careers, and they're not young guys anymore. And look, I haven't got to see Laczynski all that much because he's been primarily down with the Phantoms or hurt. But we saw Allison for the lion's share of the 2021 COVID shortened season. And when healthy, I think this guy's a damn good player and an absolute NHLer. But like you said, that doesn't mean a whole lot if you're injured 75% of the time. For Tanner Laczynski, yeah, it's nice that we all think that you can be a solid bottom six center in the NHL. And I know you yourself at times have been high on him too. But if you can't stay healthy, this year, to me, like, this is kind of like the shit or get off the pot time for this season, and or for these guys this season. And on a side note, I think we should just make T-shirts for that shit or get off the pot, because I feel like we talk about it every show. But I think that's why this season I'm kind of okay with what they did, because even if you added Gaudreau, even if you add DeBrincat, you'd just be compounding this fake dream that you guys could win a Stanley Cup. Yeah. And eventually you have all these players that you have to figure out what the fuck you have with them. Allison, Laczynski, even Felix Sandstrom. Like, Felix Sandstrom, to me, like, for you, Jay, like, let's say that Ivan Fedotov was the backup, or they had elected to re-sign Martin Jones. Like, is there anything left to prove for Felix Sandstrom, in your opinion, in the AHL?
No, I mean, he's been there, done that ad nauseum. And the issue for him over the last 3 years has been that there's just been not a lot of consistency of playing. It's like hard to – he's in that period. He entered that period of, okay, we can judge him going toward the NHL now. But the problem was the pandemic hit. His development was on that trajectory where right when the pandemic hit was when he was fully adjusted to the North American game, played some – played in the AHL, but then it all got interrupted. And it was like the Phantoms played like the same 4 teams in that one year. They had that little mini division, if you will, because of COVID. But now they're back to normal. So at this point, like when we say shit or get off the pot, there's a couple of things that means. For some players, that means like produce. Like, can you get it done at the NHL level? For Frost and Tippett, that's what it means. But for guys like Lazinski and Wade Allison, shit or get off the pot is, well, you got to be available. We got to know if we can rely on your availability, because I can't have you as a general manager, I can't have you in my picture and, filling a hole if I got to refill that hole multiple times every season because you're not available. And it's nothing against the player. Just like some players, you get banged up. It is what it is. It's bad luck. It's maybe more guys are injury prone than others. I don't know. But a general manager, when he's mapping things out, you're mapping out a fourth line of like Clutterbuck and, that one they have in on the island. You map out their fourth line. You go, okay, this is my fourth line. Are these guys going to be? Yeah, they're available. Now I don't have to worry about it. Okay, I don't want to worry about it. I just want to put it out there and not worry about it. Set it and forget it. But you can't do that yet with some of these guys with the incessant injuries. And it's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate because these are, well, like I'll take Wade Allison for example. Like this is 18 months ago that he was playing. I think he was with Hayes and Farabee, where they really like caught some chemistry in like March 2021 or April 2021. And I was penciling him in like last season on like the third line, the second power play unit. He's going to be a big time contributor, this, that, and the other thing. And then the guy played how many games last season? Because he like sprained his ankle in a rookie game or something.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, it's not your fault. It isn't, I guess. But at the same time, you're how old now? And you're injured how often now? Like at a certain point, push comes to shove. It's just, okay, see ya. Like look at Michael Neuwirth. I think when the guy was healthy, he was a pretty damn good goalie in the NHL. Yeah. But the last we saw of him was that he couldn't stay healthy in Toronto Maple Leafs training camp. And Mike Babcock gave him the boot to the curb. It's the way, like people are not going to pay you to sit on the shelf and be good sometimes. Like I would rather like a mediocre player that's always there and I know what he could give me.
Because you can depend on it.
Exactly. Because it's stable. You know what you have. And when you have a guy or guys, in the case of Lazinski and Allison, it's that much more frustrating because I think Allison is much better than a fourth line forward, even at this stage. Like, I think even Brent Flair has said on record that like they don't really see him as a fourth line player in the NHL.
I think he's at minimum a third line.
I agree. I just think that the way the Flyers are set up right now is that if you had a fourth line of Delorier, Lazinski, and Allison, you could maybe, depending on the night, depending on the situation of the game, if you're leading, if you're trailing, that line could play more than Cates, Frost, and Tippett. Yeah. So like it would almost be like a 3A, 3B type of line. You know what I mean?
And especially if one line's going and the other one's not.
Exactly. And, I think that even if Allison was playing fourth line, you would probably have him on the power play on PP2. Yeah. So there are certain things about these players that like it's not their fault, but you have to prove it. And now especially that, and this kind of ties in what I was talking to at the beginning of the show, is that now all of a sudden, like this team is in a waste baron in terms of some young players that can maybe crack the lineup, especially down the middle. Like if I'm a betting man, this time next year, we're talking about Elliot Desnoyers maybe making the NHL team. Mm-hmm. I think he's kind of been that good since his draft year. A guy like Zayd Wisdom, like, is he kind of not a prototypical player? Maybe not as early as next season, but is he not a prototypical player to kind of play the right wing on that fourth line?
Yeah, bang around.
Exactly.
Energy.
And he kind of fits that mold more than Allison. So if, let's say, Allison and Lazinski can't stay healthy consistently this season, now you're kind of grooming two in-house replacements. And at that point, look, like the players in Allison and Lazinski, but now you have some in-house replacements that you can actually depend on to be healthy.
Yeah. And Forster's a guy that should be ready next year 100%, I would think, as well. Yeah. That's the arc of his development. He had the injury with the shoulder. I think we see him make his NHL debut this season. At
I
some
wouldn't be
point, somebody
surprised.
goes down. If he's going to perform well with Lehigh, and again, this is stay healthy. I mean, God damn it, Ant. The one thing I do not want to go through again this season, like last season was miserable. It was a pain in the ass for anybody, any fan of the team that pays attention day to day is an all 82 person, like watches every game, or the media that covers them or people that cover them. I mean, I work for the team and I do every game, and it was miserable with the results of all those games. But really, the misery kind of stemmed from bad play, bad decisions, and health. Like I can't go through another season where you lose like your top three centers. You know what I mean? Like no team is ever going to survive that. And as much as I love seeing different players and guys, different skill sets and all those things, I don't want to see an AHL team playing an NHL schedule. That's basically what happened last year. I don't want to see it.
No,
Just don't.
and look, I know people don't want to hear this, and this isn't me saying that if they were healthy, they would have been, playing the Avs in the Cup final, but like they were so destroyed by injuries last season,
Ravaged.
that it didn't even kind of like mean anything to watch it, because what were you evaluating at times?
Yeah.
There were some games where you're watching
Hayden
it.
Hodgson.
They were talking. It's actually funny is that like there's a show on TSN radio down in Toronto called Overdrive that I listen to almost daily. Oh, you've been on it?
Yeah, they've booked me a few times to be on it.
They're great guys. That's the best sports talk show in Canada. So Noodles, James McLennan, he does color commentary for TSN games on television. And primarily the Ottawa Senators. And he was talking about the Flyers last year, how he was just like, there were games last year where I was preparing and I didn't know who half the players were.
Yeah.
And there were times like that. Like guys, like I remember the game I went to, actually. I remember you had a defense like Linus Hogberg was playing, like Kevin Connaughton.
Max Willman scored in the game you were at, didn't he?
Yeah, Max Willman.
The Montreal game.
Yeah. I actually ended up on NBC Sports Philadelphia that game, but but like it was a team that it was that wasn't the Philadelphia Flyers. Like I remember talking to one of the people I know within the organization, and he was just telling me on the phone. He was just like, yeah, "We just gotta get healthy, man." He's just like, "We just really gotta get healthy. We gotta see what we have here. We gotta see what we have to work with." Like there was not one game last season where they played with their complete center depth, like Couturier, Hayes, I guess Lawton and Broussard. I would assume those were like their four centers in a healthy world, and they didn't have it. Or Ryan Ellis, they played one game with their starting six completely healthy, and it was that game in Dallas, I believe.
Yeah, only 4 games last year. It was crazy. Like when I turn on the TV, I want to see the team. I don't want to. I get injuries are a part of it. I don't like watching AHL players play NHL games,
especially those who are like AHL lifers.
Yeah,
like I'm not gonna lie, like great story and everything, but like when like Jerry Mayhew mania was going on, like
I thought that was sad.
It was depressing.
Yeah, I thought that was. People got caught up in it, and like he works his bag off and everything. It's great.
No.
But there's a reason why he's a career AHLer. The fact that, people kind of caught a buzz from him, whatever. I guess they were just trying to catch a buzz from anything. But I found that to be a little sad. Like I was like, oh my God, are we really doing this?
Well, it was like, you've never heard of this guy. He's scratching the door on 30 years old.
Yeah.
And he's like the heart and soul of the team and all this. Like you said, it was sad.
And people got carried away. They're like, "Oh man, he's part of the future. He's not the problem." I'm going, "Oh my God!" Like they were saying the same thing about like Hayden Hodgson. I'm like, "Come on, this guy's not even a career AHLer. He's in the coast. Like what is going on here?" But that's how fucked up things got last year. I really hope that last year was rock bottom and this begins an ascension. Which brings me to Torts, because Torch was on with Boomer on team previews on NHL Network Radio, and Torch is really like I was surprised at a couple things he said. Now, we talked last week about how he brought up, the room and the fractured room and all that on that same interview. But in that interview, he also said, I'm concerned with how they do business, the medical staff. He goes, you got people suing the team. Like, I was really surprised he went into that. And it looks to me like there's no stone. Every stone is getting overturned. He's looking at every element of this team on and off the ice. And he hasn't even gotten them on the ice yet. But he's probably got to look at some of the practices. He can't be out there with them until next week. But he's turning everything over, and it's I don't know. I think this is a big hill for him to climb.
It's almost like he got hired to 50% be the coach, but 50% be a detective behind the scenes and figure out what the fuck's going on. And, I on the Athletic show, they had Michael Russo on, and obviously a longtime beat reporter out in Minnesota, just got promoted. And he obviously worked with a lot of guys who now run the Flyers due to their time with Minnesota. So not too hard to connect the dots there. And he was saying that from what he had heard is that there was a lot of whining going on in the room last year, a lot of finger pointing. And as we've heard, like probably a word that's become synonymous with this team since the beginning of the offseason, accountability or lack thereof. And I think that Torts is going to come in here. And like you said, I don't think it's just the team. I think there's just a lot of dysfunctionality going on throughout the organization. Look, we know what's going on with Sal Rafa and Jim McCrossin and all that. And you could speak to it better than me because of how you work more intimately with the team and don't live across the border. But I mean, those are kind of things that they must radiate through the entire room, especially when you're losing. As the saying goes, I know it's a cliche, but winning cures a lot. And when you're losing and losing in droves, I think everything around that could possibly be negative is going to infect that room. And then you add in like the Giroux stuff from last year and how bad and ugly that got behind the scenes between the captain and the management staff. I just think there was so much ugliness going on. And then even like the coaching staff. And look, I'm not going to blame Mike Yeo here. I felt really bad for him. And I think given the circumstances, he did a hell of a job specifically with the younger players. But when you have a coach who we all knew was a lame duck coach, like Dave Scott pretty much said it back in January, and you have a coaching staff that wasn't really solidified until almost Valentine's Day following the All-Star game, you had no concrete leadership, both from the coaching staff and the players, because your captain was being pushed out the door almost unwillingly to a point. And then you have the losing, the dysfunctionality with the medical staff, and you just had a perfect shitstorm go on last season. And
it was impossible for the players to just concentrate on playing and playing better to get day in and day out.
Especially when Sean Couturier isn't there, when Joel Farabee's, on and off the injury shelf. Yeah. Kevin Hayes wasn't healthy till the end of February? Yeah. And I'll throw it to you. Like, do you think what was going on, or I guess what is continuing to go on with the medical staff, kind of hurt things as well? Because Jim McCrossin has been a long-standing employee of this team.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even consider him technically medical staff. He's more training staff. He and Sal, those two don't make the decisions on injuries. Medical doctors make those decisions. So I don't know. But they hired Ian McEwen, the Irish guy that was, I think, in Australia. I'm supposed to talk to him next week. And he's has a lot of things in when they hired him. They hit a lot of boxes that he checks in that bio, kind of what he does and what he's going to do for the Flyers. I don't know. When you look at it and all the injuries, it's been players coming back maybe too early. I talked to Hazy about that the other day. He was on Wednesday's Flyers Daily, and I just talked to him about how important it was for him to come back that last time and finish the season. He goes, he's like, I heard the fans. Why is he coming back? Just shut him down for the rest of the year. We're not playing for a playoff spot. But he said, and I agree with him, it was incredibly important for him because he was having doubt if he was ever going to be able to play well again because of the injury. And the injury actually went back even into the season prior. And then he had the surgery when he exacerbated it before camp. And he was having that doubt in there. Then when he got back and finished the season strong, I mean, the first 20 games last year, Andy, he had 9 points, 3 goals and 6 assists. And he looked like shit on a plate.
Big time.
Right? And then when he came back for the last time last season, those 20 games, he had 18 points in 20 games. Yeah. I mean, the difference was night and day. So 9 points in 20 games, it's actually not horrible. But
it's not.
But 18 points in 20 games, he came back and he finally looked like Kevin Hayes again and could move. I mean, that was huge for him. So, and that sent him into the offseason. He said, like, knowing that, okay, I'm back. And had he not done that, he would have come into the offseason with a shitload of self-doubt too. So that was huge for him.
Well, the thing is that even when you account for his first 20 games, and you said it was 9 points, which, like you said, isn't terrible.
Yeah.
You know, he still
it looked terrible though.
it looked horrible, and the process was bad. And I think Charlie O'Connor actually posted a screenshot of his underlying numbers in the first 20 games and the post 20 games, and it was or the last 20 games, and it was night and day. But even when you account for his first 20 games, I think he scored like 32 points or whatever, and he basically paced for 53 points over 82 games.
Yeah.
And that's still very good. Like, if Kevin Hayes is scoring 50 to 55 points and playing the right way as we know he can, I don't think anyone's complaining, right? Like 50, 55 points for Kevin Hayes is kind of like what we're all expecting here. And I think that in a lot of ways, he's the biggest X factor this season. And you could argue that that's Sean Couturier as well. And I'm talking more so about the forward group. And you could argue it's Sean Couturier, but I think Kevin Hayes is a guy that a lot of people are split on, as opposed to Sean Couturier. It's like, we know what he's going to give you. Like, yes, he's battled injuries, but I think everyone's just kind of expecting him to be that consistent, two-way dominant, probably gets you 65 points Sean Couturier. But Kevin Hayes, a bit of a polarizing player. Not everyone was on board with the mega contract he was handed out in 2019. Obviously has done some of the Barstool stuff that not a lot of people are fans of. And he's brought in a lot of his buddies here, notably Cam Atkinson. And I think that this is a guy that has a lot to prove this year, because it's been 18 months, specifically the beginning of last season, where he struggled, or about a full calendar year. And then, like you said, he picked it up in the final 20 games. But in my opinion, if Kevin Hayes can get back to 2019-20 form and play the way he did last year, along with a better supporting cast and just a better team around him, you know, that's a big kick in the ass for this team. If you have a healthy Sean Couturier and a healthy Kevin Hayes down the middle. And obviously there's a lot more that goes into it. Like we talked about Frost and Tippett, Allison, Lazinski, all that. But if you have your two most important players back at 100%, it changes the look of the group for sure.
You know, it's funny, when I talked to Hayes too, I was surprised. Like he made a point to say that he made all his decisions on when he was coming back. It wasn't the medical team, because he kept reiterating in the interview that I just want, you know, it's hard for a player that is a big part of the team to sit there and watch watch, you know, your teammates get it handed to him game in and game out. And, you know, he just kept saying that I wanted to get back and help the team win. And he couldn't get back on the ice. And that's why he kept pushing himself to get back. And that's why he pushed himself to get back at the end too. Plus he wanted to get rid of that self-doubt, but he was pretty adamant. I made the decisions on when I come back. So I thought that was interesting. And, you know, we kind of started here. Torts has mentioned him a bunch, Ant. And I think the day-to-day for Hayes is going to be tough, because Torts is going to be all over him. But I think he's going to push, if Hayes stays healthy and handles Torts the right way, that it could be Kevin, you know, Hayes. Sorry, I got to dry throat. I think it could be Hayes' best season in the NHL, because Torts keeps mentioning me. He's got more. I think there's more there, and Torts is going to push him to get it. Sorry, I get some water.
Well, I'm just thinking about this, and this is more just like shooting the shit, pie in the sky. But like, we know the relationship between Hayes and Atkinson. We know the relationship between Atkinson and Torts. is Atkinson kind of been like the conduit between the two? Maybe Atkinson was telling Torts things behind the scenes like, hey, this is the leader. This is the guy that we're going to have to count on the most to have the turnaround season. And it's weird that it hasn't been more centered around Sean Couturier. Like, I think both of them have kind of like just by osmosis become the faces of this team, Hayes and Couturier. Yeah. But it just feels like Hayes is more at the forefront. And maybe it's because he's more of a character, more outgoing. Like I always say, you could speak to this better than me. But it just feels like Kevin Hayes is going to be the guy kind of pushed on the fans as like, this is your leader. This is the poster boy this season.
Yeah.
As opposed to Sean Couturier, who it's just, he's going to go about his business, captain, consistent, if you will. And not to say that he's going to be a slam dunk to be the captain, but Kevin Hayes feels like a guy here that in a lot of ways is going to be leaned on a lot. And can you blame them? Really?
Atkinson too.
Atkinson for sure. Lawton, I would imagine as well.
Yeah.
Like there are a certain group of players here. I would say like Couturier, Konechny, Atkinson, Hayes, and Lawton, that they're kind of like in a class of their own, and Farabee when he gets back.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest. But Hayes just, it's been like a consistent theme since Torts' first media availability back when he was hired, that he always comes back to Kevin Hayes. Yeah. And talks about how important he's going to be for this team and how he's going to lean on him. And I just have to imagine that there has to be like a Cam Atkinson connection in there.
Yeah. And Atkinson is on today's Flyers Daily. I talked to him yesterday and taped it for today. It's on today's edition of Flyers Daily. And I asked him, I said, how many of the guys have been hitting you up on what it's like to play for Torts? And he's like, all of them. I've talked to a lot of guys. They're all wondering, like he played for him for 6 years. So there's a lot of familiarity there for Atkinson. And look, Atkinson, make no mistake, stumped for him, back at the end of the season, in that end of season press conference that Cam did at Skate Zone on exit interview day. I'm sure he stumped for him with Chuck Fletcher at his meeting with the general manager before heading out for the offseason, and he certainly stumped for him when he met with me, and I did the end-of-season interview with Cam. So a lot of guys have been asking, what's it going to be like day-to-day? They should have an expectation at this point of what they're getting into this season.
For sure. Like, it felt like Cam Atkinson was beating the drum for Torts as soon as the whistle blew on the last game of the season. And you have a guy that played under Tortorella and was one of the main leaders out in Columbus under Tortorella for a long time. Yeah. And look, I think that players know what to expect from John Tortorella. I think that they know why he was brought in, not only because of the on the ice stuff, but because of the off the ice stuff. Yeah. And it's just going to be kind of a wake up call, I think. And it's tough, right? Because it felt like a few years ago we were talking, and it was a few years ago, it just doesn't feel that long ago, that we were kind of, pumping the tires of the new coaching staff headed by AV, the be a fucking flyer and all that, drinking martinis. Everyone was a huge fan of the guy. So, like, there is going to be a honeymoon phase with Torts, except the difference here is that I think that Torts has carte blanche here. Because, like you said, it's not just huge on the ice. Yeah. And I don't see a world where John Tortorella doesn't finish out his 4-year contract. I don't think he's going to be fired.
Yeah, I don't think so either. The funny thing is, too, I think Torts is very self-aware at this point in his coaching career of his assets. He knows he's going to be really hard on players. And in that SiriusXM interview with Boomer, he mentioned that, he asked him about goaltending. And Boomer said, I don't talk about goaltending because it's something I don't know enough about, so I don't talk about it. And he asked him about Carter Hart. And I thought Torts' answer was really interesting because he said, it's a position, it's the most important position in our game. It's the only position in the game that's got their own coach, a goalie coach. And, my philosophy there is really simple. Just tell your guy to keep the puck out of the net. Stop pucks. But he said, I've talked to Carter a bunch because Boomer asked about the relationship with Carter. And he said, I just want Carter to know who I am as a person, who I am as a man. And I think Torts knows that I'm going to be really tough on these guys. And he's got the awareness that he's doing it because he thinks there's more, that you can give more and you can be better. And that's why he's being a really tough coach, a really tough parent kind of thing on them. But he wants them to understand that he's doing it for them. He's not doing it just for him. He's doing it for the team, and he's doing it for the player, the individual player, and that he cares about the person and all that stuff. Because that's what we hear about Torts. But I think Torts is now self-aware that that's a major part of his personality, that it's a great trait that he has, honestly, because he honestly gives a shit about the person and all of that stuff. And he's like, I just want Carter to know who I am. And I want to know who he is. And, because he's going to push him. He's going to, but if he knows it's coming from you won't get your back up. You won't get defensive if you know he's the reason why he's doing it. And the reason why he's doing it is a positive reason, not for selfish purposes. And it's just to make you better, a better player, a better teammate, a better citizen type thing. If you understand that part of it, you don't get defensive when a coach gets critical or a coach pushes hard, because you understand. It makes sense, right?
Oh, it does.
But I think there are some players here that get defensive when you say, "I think you can get better." They get defensive about it, they hear that as, "You think I suck." No, I'm not saying you suck. You're good, but you can be better. You know what I mean? Like, some people hear things in different ways. Some look at a coach pushing them as a challenge. Others look at it like, he doesn't like me. You know what I mean? So the same words to two different people can be interpreted totally different. It's like when you read a text message. If I'm in a certain mood, this guy's being combative with me, or I read it in a different mood, the guy's trying to be sarcastic and funny. The same exact message.
Yeah.
It's just depending on how you absorb it. So the goalie relationship with Torts, I think, is they got to have a relationship. Really, the relationship is with Kim Dillabaugh, because he's the individual coach. But I think Torts knows that people are onto the fact that he's a good guy, just very difficult and demanding and accountable, and holds a high standard as a coach.
And look, would you say that AV's biggest issue, and we know that the public, call out he had of Carter Hart, which you've argued was kind of the beginning of the end for him, which just never made sense to me.
Beginning, middle, end.
But would you argue that his biggest problem was his communication to the players?
Oh yeah. He was the man in the Iron Castle. He had his, Mike Yeo and Mike Therrien. He had his, guys that worked for him that handled all the messaging. And AV was very, there's like an arrogance that was with him. I liked AV. I liked dealing with him. But, I mean, at some point, he kind of lost interest, it seemed like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's very savvy and all that. He's a good coach, but these players, I think, need to be kept pretty close to you. And I don't think he was doing that.
And what about Dave Haxtell's messaging?
Well, I mean, I think that just kind of ran out. I mean, they had some good years under Hack. Like, look at certain players too. The beginning of Konechny in the NHL, he was on a nice path. I think Hack gets a worse kind of rep than he should. He was here for a good amount of years, and look, it just ran out, and he didn't have the tools. But I mean, he was actually doing some winning in some of those years with a team that was in a rebuild. I mean, and fourth lines with Van de Velde and stuff like that. Like, no offense, but those guys didn't belong in the NHL.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think he's a better coach than his time here was better than a lot of people give him credit for, because you have to consider what he had to deploy player-wise. He didn't have much. I mean, Dave was very stoic, you know what I mean, on the bench. There was a lot of fire there, though, I dealt with him quite a bit off the ice and spent a lot of time with him outside of the team. And he was a good guy. Like, I try not to let that cloud my judgment that he and I had a very good relationship. But he was a really good guy, good family man, good hockey man. But the first job in the NHL coming from the collegiate game, I think is a learning curve for him too. And I think he'll do a better job in Seattle because of it. You learn from those mistakes. Like Bruce Cassidy, same thing. First job in the NHL did not go well.
No.
A lot of guys, first
Mike
job doesn't
Sullivan.
go great. Yeah. Look at Sully. It's another great one.
Yeah.
And then the second job, all of a sudden they look like a great coach. And you go, what the hell's going on here, right?
Yeah.
I think
Craig Berube, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Chief came in. I thought he was a decent coach for the Flyers. People thought he wasn't a tactical coach. Bullshit.
No.
Because they looked at him as a player, as a goon, right?
Very tactical.
And cerebral as all hell. Like you saw what he did in St. Louis and how he handled them from a emotional standpoint that whole year. And remember that playoff series with Vegas where all that shit went down and he got screwed? That team could have folded up right there. Didn't. So
yeah. So all this to say is that, like, I don't think this group of players has had as good of a communicator and as comfortable in his skin as you're going to have with Tortorella, because AV wasn't a great communicator, had an arrogance, delegated a lot to his, I want to say minions, but they're not his minions, to
delegates.
Mike, to his delegates, to do that communicating. And then you had Dave Haxall, who probably wasn't just that comfortable yet to be as comfortable in his own skin, and was a very stoic guy.
But also had Hexy tapping on his shoulder like, Dave, Hexy was so heavily involved that I imagine that part was a little annoying at times too.
Well, was Gord Murphy not there pretty much to just to pedal back to Hexy and let him know everything that was going on in that room?
The conduit, yeah.
So look, and I do think that quickly on Dave Haxall, I think the biggest problem with Dave Haxall is that he was kept a year beyond his expiration date, and that's not his fault. The guy, he can't be faulted that his boss didn't want to fire him. And I think we all quickly learned that Ron Hextall was the bigger issue there. But that's all in the past. There's no point going down that rabbit hole. But all this to say is that I don't think this group of players has ever had a coach as comfortable in his own skin, with the clout that Tortorella has, and with the communication ability that John Tortorella has. And now I'm very curious to see, and Mike Yeo is probably a good communicator, but again, it is kind of a different dynamic when a guy's a lame duck coach and is kind of a carryover from the prior regime behind the bench. But you're going to have a lot of players getting their first taste of this kind of coach, this kind of caliber of coach. And we kind of put AV on that pedestal, and I think the first year he was, but it quickly went south. Whatever happened in the bubble, we know his parents were having a tough time with COVID. He completely checked out. That was obvious. But I don't think Torts is a guy who's going to check out. I think that Torts, in a lot of ways, took this job to take on a new battle. He's done the win now thing. He's won a Stanley Cup, albeit 18, 19 years ago at this point. But he's checked a lot of boxes, except for salvaging a train wreck to this proportion.
Yeah.
And I think in Columbus, he did it in a lot of ways. But I think that was more of an up-and-coming team, as opposed to a team that's just completely fallen from grace. I don't even know what you could peg this team as, except for a team that just needs to be stabilized, as Chuck Fletcher said. And I think
wrapped in a riddle,
to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of players here that are going to benefit greatly from John Tortorella. And look at him, just to use an example, look at a guy like Rasmus Ristolainen, obviously the most polarizing player this team has. How many coaches has Ristolainen had in his NHL career?
God, he's been in the league 8 years now? 7 years?
Yeah.
He's probably had 9 coaches.
Yeah, off the top of my head, Don Granato, Ralph Kruger, Dan Bilesma, AV, Mike Yeo. Who was the coach before Dan Bilesma? Was he there when Ted Nolan was there?
May have, yeah, he had to have been there when Teddy Nolan was there.
Yeah, so that is an obscene amount of coaches. And last year, how many defensive coaches did the Flyers have? Mike Yeo, Daryl Williams, and who was the last one to get? Was John Torchetti a defensive coach?
No. Maybe, I guess probably more Nick Schultz.
Yeah, Nick Schultz. So there's a lot of players here, or even Ivan Provorov. Even the guy who's been the number one defenseman, he broke into the NHL. It was who? Gord Murphy. Then it was Rick Wilson. Was that his name?
Yeah, Rick Wilson came in.
Rick Wilson. Then it went to Mike Yeo. Then you had 3 guys last year. Like, there are a lot of players on this team that are going to greatly benefit from stabilization. I'm not going out of my way to use that word, but it was the perfect word that Chuck used.
Yeah.
Is that they are going to benefit from consistency behind that bench, stabilization behind that bench, and knowing now that, like we said a couple minutes ago, is that this coaching staff isn't going anywhere. Maybe like guys will get interchanged here and there, like Daryl Williams or Rocky Thompson. But I think as far as Bradshaw and John Tortorella go, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, those are the two. Yep.
And even a guy like Bradshaw, like, I think that was a very shrewd hire by the Philadelphia Flyers to bring him in. And I'm really curious to see how some stabilization behind the bench goes for these players. And it doesn't just affect the defense. I just think they're kind of directly affected by it in a lot of ways, mostly because of the style that Torts coaches and because his guy is going to be the defensive coach. But even some of the forwards, like we talked about Travis Konechny. Like, look, I'm not the biggest fan of Travis Konechny, but I've also spoke to people with the Flyers who think that there's a lot more there to give for Travis Konechny.
Yeah.
Like, I've spoken to people with the Flyers who have kind of made me change my opinion on how I view Konechny.
You know, it's funny because everybody looks at every player right now and everything is trash. That's what you see, the sensationalized social media rant of it's all trash, and that's not true. So, all right, well, let's wrap it up there. And we'll be back next week. We'll do it again. We'll count down the days. We're getting right there to training camp. I can't believe they're going to be in camp next week. Can't wait to go down and get eyes on and see what everything looks like. And we'll be getting close to preseason games. A week from Saturday, a week from tomorrow is preseason hockey. I got to get the suits out and get them dry cleaned, and I guess go down. We got to do all these games. We do all of the preseason games as well on the Flyers radio network. So
they're playing Boston, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be fun. That's going to be an interesting team to watch this year too, the Bruins.
Yeah, no doubt. And thanks for doing this. We'll talk next week, man.
Yeah, man. Take it easy, bud.
There he is, Anthony DeMarco from north of the border. Let's get rid of those lines on my face. There we go. Let me tell you about BetParks one more time here. Episode 64 of BetParks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Get the BetParks app because now's a good time to look at all the futures in the National Hockey League. A great time to look at week 2 in the NFL. Great time to look at a great college card and baseball playoffs coming. You can bet same game parlays. You can bet live in-game betting, alternate lines, player performances, touchdowns thrown, over-unders, yardage, you name it. It's all there for you. First to score, bet quarters, halves, and football, whatever you want to do. It's all available to you right there on the BetParks app. It's simple to use. It's great. It's so easy to navigate, easy deposit methods, fast payouts, the whole thing, and a free, risk-free bet up to $750 by using the promo code JASON750, JASON750. That'll get you a $750 risk-free bet. That's for new and existing users, by the way. And terms and conditions apply. So do make sure you check that out and take advantage of the risk-free bet. And grab the BetParks app. You're going to love it. You're absolutely going to love it. Games that you watch sometimes that you don't have any emotion tied into. Two maybe good teams in the NFL. You're not a fan of either team per se, but you want to put a little action on it. Simple to do. Grab the BetParks app, get your action in, and make the experience even more fun as you watch some of the games with teams without an emotional connection. Sometimes they're the smarter ones to gamble on as well. The emotional connection can lead you the wrong way sometimes. So grab the BetParks app. Do need to be over 21 and present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Awesome stuff. And we will crank her up again next week. Training camp begins. It's all popping off in the NHL. We'll talk to you next week on BetParks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Have a great weekend, everybody.